Well, good afternoon, freedom fighters and Alberta patriots, and welcome to another edition of Live at 5 with Paul. It's just amazing as the weeks go by and where we end up. But I guess I want to start off with I hope everybody had a beautiful and wonderful Easter Sunday. That for Christians, the most important day for many in history is just the declaration of the resurrection of Jesus Christ is you know, it's the biggest news and the most important holiday for Christians around the world. And luckily, we were able to celebrate it at a limited version, but at least we had that freedom. Today, though, what I really want to talk about is medical freedom and the problems that are being imposed on people and our medical freedoms that are being lost. And again, because of our medical emergency, churches are not able to operate at full capacity, and we continue to see the thugs coming and wanting to shut down churches. I didn't hear anything happening with the Pastor Coates yesterday, so I take it no news is good news. But bottom line, we have a government that is bound on flexing its power and authority and telling us what we can and can't do. But David, if you want to pop up that first thing here by Dr. Patrick Phillips. Over the next few weeks, we must all ask ourselves what kind of world we want our children to grow up in. Do we grant them ownership of their bodies, indeed, their self, their souls, their identities, or do we bequeath that ownership to the state? Vaccine passports and recalibration of social ethics. And that's kind of the subject that I want to cover today and talk about that. Are we going to pass on those freedoms to our children? Or are we going to abdicate them and say, well, no, that the state knows best and the state can make those decisions for us, and we will be little puppets and be more than willing to comply? Or what we will allow is that those who want to comply will impose their restrictions on those who choose to be free and to put their lives at risk. And I find it fascinating that this discussion carries on. And I've said it many times, I'm going to say it again today, is what I don't understand when it comes to exercising one's freedom, why someone who wants to quarantine, who doesn't want to go out, who has this incredible fear of COVID and the possibility of death facing them, want to impose that on those who are brave or those who are needing to make a living and to go out there and open up their business, and for those that are willing to do business to allow them in. And again, I can't quite wrap my head around this mentality that those who want to stay locked up want to do that to others. And to me, I'm sorry, it's just wrong. I'll respect their desire to isolate and to do that, but I think that it's wrong to impose that on the rest of the world. And again, we continue to see studies and people speaking out on the problems that people are having with the lockdowns and their children and the suffering that is just unacceptable, and we shouldn't be in that situation. But I listened to a Dr. Ryan Cole this week, who was making a presentation down in Idaho, and I put the link up on my website, paulhinman.com. But he brings up a lot of really interesting points that probably the most significant that I thought that was new to me was this idea that if you actually have a cure, then vaccines basically aren't allowed in medical research and to be developed. That vaccines are only for things that aren't curable, or that there's no treatment, I guess is what I should say, that there's no treatment, for smallpox, for meningitis. And so they allow vaccines to be, developed. And it was interesting for me to listen to him to talk about that. And once again, because I've spoken many times, and we've put other things up, like with Dr. Perry when he was before the U.S. Senate testifying the importance of ivermectin and its efficacy. And once again, we have another doctor, Dr. Ryan Cole, who I believe that he stated that he has done over 100,000 tests for COVID, because he runs a lab and works with that. But it was fascinating to listen to him talk about the efficacy of ivermectin and how he's as a doctor has prescribed it to a few patients. But what I want to get back to on this, though, is the College of Physicians and in the States, how they're coming down on doctors who want to do their own research and say, there's looks like there's opportunity here that we can do something, and to use their best professional judgment. And I'm going back to the fact of the censorship that's going on, and again on social media, that my link when I wanted to tweet that out, his interview, I wasn't able to do that. Can't put it out there. But I think if you go to my website, paulhinman.com, it's there linked to BitChute, and the person can watch it there. But again, I'm not allowed to tweet it out because it's been censored. And this censorship is real. It continues. And they're quick on the draw to pull these things out. But anyways, there's another interesting video that also came out by a doctor, and oh my goodness, I can't ever say his name right, but Neurenschwander, I think. Fascinating video as he talks about vaccines and how they're developed. And again, it was enlightening for me to watch that video. I believe that's also on my website, and you can watch that on BitChute. But he brought up some really, really interesting, what would I say, points that I think should be pointed at. And I plan on writing a letter tomorrow to the Premier and to our health official, Henshaw, and perhaps a few others, and to Chandro, our health minister. But I didn't realize that they have two, I guess, whether you want to say code of ethics or levels of scrutiny to bring forward a new drug versus to bring forward a new vaccine. And a vaccine comes under biomedics, whereas a new drug comes under medicine, and you have to do a great deal of research and double-blind studies in order to prove the efficacy and also the side effects of these. And this doctor did an incredible job of talking about the problem with vaccines, how they just compare it to other vaccines. And he gives some quite alarming numbers when he talks about them. And the thing that makes the most sense to me, though, is the fact that you need to do double-blind studies. And without that, you don't know the results. And so to do a vaccine study and compare it to an old vaccine isn't good enough. You need to actually have these double-blind studies. And for example, let's say there was 10,000 people in this. We'll go with women because this is one of the issues that they're talking about, this vaccination. But if there's 10,000 women in the vaccination study, double-blind, and they don't know whether they're getting a placebo or whether they're getting the real shot or whether it's just a saline solution. But if in fact there were 7 miscarriages and there was 5,000 in each control group or 50,000 or whatever it is, and in the one control group that actually got the vaccine, and you found that there were 7 miscarriages, then you'd look at the ones with saline and see, well, was there 7 miscarriages in that group? But to compare it to another vaccine and say, well, it's not any better or any worse, we're missing the whole point of whether or not a vaccine is safe and what are the long-term side effects that may or may not come into effect. And historically, we've seen problems creep up and come to harm people. And we don't want to do this. And so we need to do the double-blind studies in order to know if things are safe. And so my first question for Dr. Henshaw is, has there been double-blind studies to see, one, the efficacy, and two, the side effects of this new vaccine? Um, my understanding is that there hasn't been a double-blind study. Please verify that for us, and it's your job to be letting us know if it's safe. This doctor also goes on to say that, you know, they declare that these things are safe, but they don't actually put out the data on what the different side effects that they're recording. And it's interesting, again, because according to this doctor, and I'd like Dr. Henshaw to verify this for us, and our health minister and our premier, my understanding is that this vaccination program was fast tracked so that these companies could develop it quickly and not go through the regular protocol that's necessary there, because it takes too long. But one of the things that they signed off, and again, I'd like Dr. Henshaw to verify this, is that they're going to be 100% open with the data so that the public and others in the scientific field could review the data and know that there's a level of trust. But yet that data isn't available. This doctor says he's not able to get it, and that they don't release the data. They're just saying that it's safe. And it's interesting that when they say that it's safe, they don't even include the side effects that they're recording. That's in another whole different paper that you have to go and get. And then again, they just say that we don't contribute this to the vaccine, but then they don't go on to explain it, according to this doctor. And so very troubling that this is the situation. I want to switch here for a minute and talk about what I want to consider two of the roles of government. And I don't know that they are both the roles that government should do, but right now they're two of the roles that we have. And the one is that government kind of sets the standards and says what you have to meet. If it's a building and they have building codes, that's what you have to build to. They might have, you know, the distance code that too many houses were built too close with only 2 or 3 feet separation. When there's a fire, it's very hard to control. So many building codes now and fire codes is that, you know, the houses have to be 6 feet off the property line. And so that means that they're 12 feet apart. We have many different safety codes for our cars. You got to have seat belts, got to have airbags. And these are all government researched, and they come up with the idea of where it's safe. And some of the other ones that are more nuances, for example, is speed. How fast can you drive your car safely? In a school zone, we kind of say it's got to be 30 kilometers an hour. On most city roads and stuff that are the larger open ones, 50 kilometers an hour. When we get out between Calgary and Edmonton, we're only allowed 110, but we've had an MLA who's bringing it forward to say, let's go to 120 because they feel that's safe. But anyways, the bottom line is that the government takes on this role, food inspection, food safety, you know, on what's safe and what isn't, and then it sets the guidelines. And on the reverse side of that, though, is that if something has happened and harm's happened to an individual, governments under the judicial system, maybe we should just call the legal system because there's not a lot of justice more often than not for the victims, that you're supposed to be able to hold someone accountable. And what's disturbing to me is that, number one, these companies have had they're immune to any legal repercussions because the government says, no, we're going to protect you from that because it's more important to get this vaccine out than it is for you to be liable and have to go through all of these safety precautions to make sure that there's not going to be any harm done to the recipients who accept this. And so that's very troubling that was signed off. But again, the reason why the government signed off on that, to my understanding, and please, Dr. Henshaw and Minister Shandro, let us know whether you've read that and whether you're doing your due diligence to protect Albertans from these things, because there is no legal grounds to hold them accountable, no liability suits on this. But in turn, they were supposed to be producing and having full access to all the data so that we know, how many miscarriages have there been? How many blood clots have there been? How many heart attacks? How many individuals that received this vaccine have passed away? I hear way too many stories. I hear of one facility that had zero COVID issues in 10 months, 11 months, or whatever it was. But then they vaccinated the senior facility, and now they have COVID problems that they kept them out for over 10 months. I heard another disturbing individual, and again, they haven't verified this yet, but 85-year-old gentleman living in a senior care facility and excellent health for all concerned at 85. He would go out, shovel the sidewalks, did a lot of things, went down to the coffee shop every morning to talk with the guys. Quite active, but 85 and not in pristine health at the peak of his life. But anyways, he got the vaccine last. When was that? Anyways, not too long ago. An hour later, he was dead. These are very disturbing issues, and the government needs to be honest and up to date with us and give us the data. Is that 1 out of a million? Is it 1 out of 100,000? Is it 1 out of 10,000? And again, I've voiced my concerns in the past about the fear mongering and the limited information they give us on a daily basis. And now, 1/3 of those people that are testing positive have the variant, and they're very concerned that this is an uprise. And again, I just think that, wow, tell us that, okay, there was 500 people, 800 people tested today, but how many of those are asymptomatic? How many of them are struggling? And again, they only put out the numbers, in my opinion, that create the fear, that create that strategy to keep people looking at other people and pointing the finger of blame that you shouldn't be out, you shouldn't be doing things, we shouldn't have restaurants open, shouldn't be going to the gym, we certainly shouldn't be singing in a choir together at church. It just goes on and on and on. But so anyways, we've got this dilemma of what's the role of government, and do they protect our freedoms, or do they strip them away for the so-called good of society, when, again, we've discussed this many times, have they demonstrated demonstrably? Have they justified the actions that they're taking? And I say no. And again, we continue to see that nobody's getting their day in court, because it's quite obvious that the government and the medical people can't demonstrate, they can't justify these extreme actions that they continue to take on us. But David, maybe do you want to put up that first one? Let's see. We did Dr. Phillips on the Ontario Health Minister. Do you want to put up that one here? Again, this is quite interesting here, but the Ontario Health Minister on there says, if people choose not to get the vaccine, they may not be able to do certain things, but that will be their choice. And so they're talking there that you have a choice. You can either comply or you can't do things. That isn't freedom. And I had another individual call me this week, and he put it very succinctly. He says, Paul, I've come to the conclusion that choice and that agency and to pick and choose is good. And when that choice has been taken away from us and we're not able to choose, that's evil. And I've thought about that a lot in this last week, and I have to conclude that's very accurate for the most part, that when we've lost our freedom of choice, our freedom to act, our freedom to make a living, our freedom to go to church and sing together or sing in a choir, that we don't have a choice. And that's evil, because we could allow people to go and do that. And those who don't want to have the choice to say, I prefer to stay home and isolate and protect themselves from this terrible disease that's out there, this virus that's killing so many people. And so choice is very important, but yet the Ontario Minister of Health doesn't think that it is. that your choice is that you can either be free or not. And I don't know. I just disagree and say that we need to be free here. Um, I want to jump to the Constitution for a minute and discuss that, because this really is the balancing act. And the question to ask ourselves is, what what should be our freedoms? And again, the more that I've looked and reflected since 2013, when I saw it firsthand, when the people of High River lost their freedoms to go back to their homes, they lost their property, they weren't allowed to go and check on them or to clean them up. And I couldn't believe the heavy hand of government at stripping away those people's ability to choose whether or not they wanted to go in and check their houses or to work on them, and basically says, no, it's not safe and you can't do it. And then when we look at COVID and where we've gone, again, just to me, extreme actions. But the purpose of the government, again, and I probably should get out the US one here to read it, but they talk that, that people came together and created government so that it could protect our freedoms. And I'm a huge believer in that. And then the more I see these freedoms being eroded, the more convinced I am that the role of government is to protect our freedoms, and to give us the information that allows us to make an informed decision on the risk, depending on who we are. And again, with the simple example of COVID, there's just no question that for some people, it truly is a high risk, and they probably should isolate and not go out if you're over 82 and you have some other issues. But for younger people, especially those below 50, and especially for our children in the school, that there's less risk with the original COVID than there was with the annual flu for young kids and for children in school and those things. But yet they've lost their livelihood, their ability to go out and to enjoy. And I just think that it's despicable what we're doing to them and the long-term effects that we're going to have on those children. That again, many of them are paranoid. The fear in them that they can't hardly live a healthy life because of the fear that our governments and our so-called medical professionals have instilled on them, and it's just so wrong. But what bothers me, and I keep thinking about this, is that the old saying, it doesn't matter how much you know until people know how much you care. And the longer this goes on, the less I truly believe that our premier and our health officials care about us as individuals. They care about these so-called numbers. They care about the comparison. They care about getting reelected. And so they're making decisions that they think that, oh, the majority of people want this or the majority of people want that. And again, it goes back to what I've talked about many times, is whether it's the tyranny of the one or tyranny of the majority, it's wrong, and that tyranny needs to be checked. And the only way it can be checked is by a constitution that respects the rule of law, that's there to protect the individual's rights. I just think that we need to continue to speak out, to write letters, to send emails, to attend protests, and let our elected officials know that we want our freedoms, and we want our medical freedoms, most importantly at this point, because there's a lot at risk here. And again, if you want to put up Dr. Phillips' comment here, his tweet this past week here, I'd like to go over that again. Over the next few weeks, we must all ask ourselves what kind of world we want our children to grow up in. Do we want to grant them, sorry about that, my phone going off, forgot to turn that on to silence. Do we want to grant them ownership of their bodies, indeed, their self, their soul, their identities, or do we bequeath that ownership to the state? And that's really the question for today's broadcast, is what do we as Albertans want to do? Are we going to bequeath their future to the state? And I say categorically no, that's wrong. we need to fight for them. I would invite you again to go to the Wild Rose website, wildrose.party. Be part of this if you feel this is the right thing to do, that we need to be independent, self-reliant, and to have a say in our future, or whether the status quo is okay. But David, do we have some questions that we can answer online here?
I'm going to say there's no questions, real questions yet.
Oh, okay. Well, I haven't really been watching over here, so I'll maybe scroll
I,
through
I
here.
will I will put up a question. I'm not sure if you know the answer to this, so hold on here.
Always love trying to be stumped here. Is there any way of finding out why the Vancouver Drug Company, that has an effective drug approach by Health Canada last year and secured doses, isn't being used? Abbreviated BAM. It's being used somewhere, including the USA. If you could, Lori, if you could send back in what BAM stands for, I haven't heard that one, but to me, there's no question that the government and the health authorities are clamping down and continue to clamp down hard on treatment. They're gung ho and they see the future of the world with vaccination, which brings me back to another subject that I guess I'm going to talk about. But if we were to each as individuals to come together and look at each other and discuss and say, what do we want to give up for a year? And one person might say, well, let's give up our sight. I'm going to wear blinders and I'm going to be in the dark for an entire year. Another one might say, well, I'm going to give up my legs. I'm going to go and I'm going to get in a wheelchair, and I'm not going to use my legs for an entire year. Pick whatever it is that you might want. My point in thinking this through is, what would our legs be like in a year from now, not using them? What would our eyes be like for a year of darkness and exposing them again? We Long-term effect, it would be very detrimental to our eyes and to our legs, and I wouldn't want to try it just to see if I can recover from that. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because of the 1 year lockdown and the loss of those freedoms that we've had. And I'm very concerned listening to different doctors talk about our immune system and our innate immune system. And historically, when you go back, we've been very healthy here in North America. This Dr. Neuenschwander, he talked about in the 60s that we were the healthiest people pretty much on the earth. But since we've been bringing in vaccinations and what would I say, messing with our immune system, we've compromised it. And I'm very concerned, being locked up for a year and not socializing, that we're creating a bubble, a health bubble, viral bubble that's going to explode. And by not letting our immune system be robust and getting out and to exercise and do those things and to be exposed, I think that we're creating a actual real crisis to hit us, because our immune system is being compromised. It's not being utilized. We've been isolated. We're not socializing like we normally do. And that's a real concern for me. That again could be one of the side effects of the lockdown that nobody has thought about, because that isn't the focus. And it's just wrong. We need to have those freedoms. We need to be free to choose on how we want to be responding to our health issues. And there's going to be those brave ones that say, well, no, I trust my immune system. I want to keep it vibrant. I want to keep it working. And so we're out and about. And others that again want to say, well, I want to trust government. I want to trust big pharma. I think that they can protect me better than my immune system. And so they go with that. But once again, the question is do we have our medical freedom? And with these passports and what's going on, I'm very concerned. And as Dr. Phillips says, in these next few weeks, could be a tipping point on whether or not we have that medical freedom. I can't remember the individual down in Pennsylvania bringing forward legislation. I talked about this last month, though, is what we need our premier to do here is to actually protect Albertans from these vaccination passports, protect us from businesses that want to impose this on us, and say no, that people have their freedom. And again, this is a great concern. It's a slippery slope, and we don't know the long-term side effects of this shot, and we should be very cautious or allow those who are what would I say, nervous, like myself. I just have no desire to get the shot. I want to trust my immune system, but I have many family members that have gone and got the shot. And again, I appreciate their freedom of choice and for them to be allowed to get that, but they're comfortable meeting and greeting. We got together for Easter, but there's just a real problem here, and this loss of freedom and this complete trust in the state and this complete trust in big pharma saying that you can't look after yourself, that this is a deadly disease, this is a deadly virus, this is a deadly bug, and to scare everybody is a long-term problem that I just see the cost of this continuing, and again, losing our medical freedom. I think many people have seen the video. Gosh, I can't believe I can't think of his name. Is it Gary Fast, who wasn't allowed to fly out to Edmonton to participate in a rally there? We now have a no-fly list inside our country. And these are great concerns, and I just urge people to continue to write, to call, to speak out, to tell our politicians that we want our medical freedom along with our other freedoms. But if there's no questions, I appreciate those who have tuned in today and to realize the importance of this. And again, a lot of people say, why do we keep talking about COVID? Well, it's because the government keeps doubling down on us. And the old saying goes that, it's hard to drain the swamp when all you're doing is fighting alligators. And that's what COVID is doing for many, many people. We'll continue on. And like I say, I plan to draft a letter to the Premier and to Dr. Henshaw, asking them some critical questions on the double-blind tests, on whether or not they understand that the data isn't being produced and don't have access to it. Do they understand and agree that there's no liability to these companies if in fact there is a problem? Supposedly the government's going to give you $1,500 if you have a bad side effect or some amount therein. But these are all problems where the government is not taking up two of its traditional roles: one, of ensuring that what is being used publicly is safe, and number two, that if there is a problem, that there's that liability of the individual or the corporation who's produced that. And so these are concerns that need to be addressed. Appreciate you tuning in and look forward to talking to you again this week. And
Paul,
yes?
just going to add that the question about that company in Vancouver that Lori made,
Yes.
She did have a link to the video. I don't know if anybody wants to go to this link, but it's actually, I quickly looked at it, and the CBC actually has a interview with the CEO, and it's something that I think people should watch, that the government is totally missing out on.
No, I appreciate it. Then let's just maybe wrap up with the fact of this censorship and not being allowed to have a public debate on these things, and for people to make their own decisions. But there's no question on the heavy hand of government on whether you want to say verbally attacking, censoring, threatening their medical license, their practicing license, if in fact they don't follow the status quo. And again, if you want to talk a very interesting case that I've used many times historically, but is Dr. Oh my goodness, Dr. Barry Marshall and Robin Warren. Back in the 80s, ulcers were a big problem, a multi-billion-dollar business for the pharmaceutical companies. And Dr. Marshall said that no, it is caused by a bacteria and it can be treated with antibiotics. And I mean, the vicious attacks that he had and everything else were just unbelievable. But from 1980 to 2005, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his discovery of the Helicobacter pylori bacterium that was causing ulcers. Because back then it was just the consensus, isn't that wonderful? The consensus that it was caused by stress and acid. And so you had the antacids, and you had people taking stress leave to cure their ulcers, and it just wasn't. And thousands upon thousands of people, you know, suffered, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands with ulcers. But here's this doctor who did the research. Again, he took a deadly dose himself, the freedom to try, the freedom to die trying if you want. But a fascinating story of Dr. Barry Marshall and the discovery of the Helicobacter pylori bacterium and the ulcers that it caused. And again, a change in our medical history because of that. And again, it's just wrong for professionals not to be able to have an open debate, to be able to share ideas. And we see it down in the States, doctors going before the Senate, pleading with them, please just read the reports, look at these things. And we need to be able to share this information. There's some fascinating information out there. I haven't seen this one from Lori. Appreciate that, Lori. We'll look at it, and sounds like we'll get it up on our website, because we need to have an open and honest debate about this. And this censorship, this absolutely intimidation, this bullying that our government and our medical ministers and our medical chief medical officers are imposing us are wrong, and we need to keep fighting back, and this war will continue. But anyways, really appreciate it. God bless, and we'll look forward to the next discussion. Take care.